Yeah, we'll just admit someone who's just coming in. Yeah, let's get going because yeah, there's yes, 11:35. Let's go. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining and making the time to join this session. As a fellow nerd, it's a pleasure to welcome Paul into our space. I think data has been people only just starting in many parts of the sector to understand the importance of data. As a marketer by profession, I started as a marketer, but BT, you understand that as well, how audience insight is key to every audiences really should be at the heart of everything we do. Often it's not. But at the end of the day, you want people to watch, we want people to engage, and we want to be able to sell programs. So this session is, I'm really excited to hear more from Paul about what he's going to share. Paul comes from obviously a research background. Before Fremantle, he was at BBC Studios. He now currently heads up the Global Research and Insight Department at Fremantle and has done for over 6 years. And at Fremantle, he works with all parts of the business globally, supporting productions, development, sales, and TV programming through audience data and analysis. So, Paul, welcome.
Thank you. Really happy to be here. Can I, obviously, as you've just introduced me as a nerd needs
in the best possible sense.
No, I'm perfectly comfortable with that and have been for many years. I have slides, so I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
You should be able
to, obviously, I'm hoping that you can kind of see that.
Fantastic.
Can you see?
Yep.
Excellent. So obviously I'm going to minimize you so that I can't be distracted. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you all. Expectations are high. I hope I can deliver on that. So this is Know Your Audience. So it's developing and producing with data and insights. And this isn't taking away from the creative process at all. This is adding and giving insight to key creatives or key production or key parts of the kind of TV industry, folk out there, to help them make informed decisions. But first up, as kind of most of you won't have a clue who I am really, let's just start with a bit of an overview of me. Look, the slides are going to take about 20-25 minutes, and then we can have that big debate and you can all say, no, it's all about creative, it's nothing about data, it's that, and then we can go from there. But look, here's a photo of me in the Arizona desert. So I just want to talk to you about how I got here as well. So I graduated over 20 years ago with a degree in economics. I moved to London. I knew I didn't really want to work in any kind of finance or associated roles at all. So I started doing a temping job at the Open University, which then became into a kind of permanent role, just doing a bit of admin. But what they offered was something absolutely amazing, which was free university courses. I mean, nothing is free now. So I started to do an MA in social research methods whilst working full time. And this kind of helped clarify what I wanted to do in my life. What I really liked is I liked numbers. I liked telling stories with those numbers. I liked hanging out with kind of liberal minded people with good attitudes. So I started looking for roles in kind of media advertising. And then I got a role in Fremantle a couple of years later. I started at Fremantle as a research assistant in about 2004, I think it was, where I stayed for a couple of years. And as you've just said, went to BBC Studios. I was a magazine publisher, Metro newspaper, but always within research, insight, data, trying to tell stories, trying to make people be engaged, because there's nothing worse than being a nerdy nerd and nobody listening to you. So that's kind of my career journey. But I'm from a working class household. My dad worked for British Gas as an engineer. Mum worked in a supermarket when I was growing up. My maternal granddad came over from Ireland to help rebuild the country after the Second World War. And this is where I got my work ethic from. So an interesting story, well, for me, is at 13, he was building an extension to our house. And he saw that I wasn't really doing much during the summer holidays. And so he said to me, next year, you're working with me. So at the age of 14, and every single holiday, whether that was summer holidays, Easter holidays, half terms, I would be picked up at about 10 to 8 in the morning, half a mile down the road, and I'd be on site with him and others till gone 5 o'clock. I earned some decent money. I'm quite handy with DIY now, but not as good as my wife would expect. I learned some awful jokes. and I learned not to take myself too seriously, but also really was the work ethic. And that's kind of been instilled into me from that really early age. So that's me. Let's talk about what I currently do. So our team, the Global Research and Insight team, is based in London. There's 8 of us, and we've got a few people scattered around the world. What we try to do is try to understand how TV shows are performing in terms of audiences. What do people think of those shows? So that could be primary research, it could be social analysis, and we try to prove the value of these then back to broadcasters or streamers or to our customers. And we do this globally, and we can work across, as you've said, all content divisions we've got within Fremantle, such drama and film, entertainment, documentaries. We work with finished programming in terms of the sales to try and help data sell those programming. We work with strategy to understand what we should be doing in certain areas as well. So I know this is billed as Know Your Audience, developing and producing with data. And it really is something that is pushed quite hard within Fremantle. And I have to always emphasize, and I'll keep doing this throughout the presentation, that it's not taking away from the creative, it's just giving you some form of understanding. And obviously this is through a kind of 20-minute kind of PowerPoint presentation, but there's other ways that we can kind of do that within the business through dashboarding or through kind of more bespoke analysis. So I'm going to explain how we do this, the tools we have available. Obviously then, in the light of the current situation, in terms of talking about your audience, I want to share a little bit of primary research that we've recently conducted into 12 countries. Well, you need to know how your audience is thinking and feeling to be able to connect with them with TV programming. So this is important to kind of share with the business and to share with you as well. And look, the average TV show creative worker, I don't think is not really reflective of the wider audience that they're actually serving. So we need to be telling people about the audience. Then I'm going to showcase a few trends that I think are interesting, and hopefully you will do too. And like I said, it should take about 20 minutes. So I'm going to kind of kick off with what we have available and how we kind of go about doing these things. So we've got 3 broad areas of what we do. We've kind of got audience measurement, which is quite obvious in terms of understanding who's watching. And we've got a range of different tools that we use to understand that audience, whether it's linear, whether it's in the streaming space, or whether it's the social audience through Meltwater. And all of those things we kind of combine together to try to get an understanding about what's actually happening with our content and content of our kind of competitors and obviously our customers. And then we look at content and industry trends. And this is obviously quite obvious, but there's a range of different tools out there to kind of tell you the type of genres that are kind of peaking at the moment, or what we're looking at in terms of the content of the streamers, which is kind of through Ampere, or what's actually happening with subscriber numbers. And I'll kind of take you through a few bits there as well. And then on the right-hand side, we do our own primary research in-house. So, I mean, the main reason we do this is just the sheer volume that we have to kind of do across most of our shows, which keeps the cost down. So we speak directly to the audience, pretty much anywhere in the world. And we put little surveys together, we do kind of little mini groups, and then we push that back to the creatives or to whoever has been kind of asking this research. And this means we can do it really quickly. We can turn things around within a day. So if somebody has a question, like what are we going to do with this show in Israel? How are we going to change it? We can then turn something around and be able to say, well, this is what the audience is feeling about this piece of talent or this particular change that you've made. And then decisions can be made whether to kind of act on that or kind of ignore us. And sometimes people just ignore us, and that's absolutely fine as well. And it was iCount that we used to conduct a 12-country study, which I'm going to give you a little bit of insight now about how audiences are feeling. So, I mean, it might have changed. I mean, bloody hell, we did this at the start of September, and look what's been happening in the last week or two. But at the start of September, we spoke to over 6,000 people in 12 countries and found that the events that are going on globally are really taking their toll emotionally, with people really anxious and worried about the future and about, in fact, about the current as well. Audiences are in a different place to a year ago. And I think stress and the financial situation is kind of really heightening this. And it's important to know that and to be able to ensure that the content that you're creating is engaging with those audiences. Obviously, being a nerd, got to have some charts. There'll be a fair few charts, get used to them. Across all markets, half describe themselves as worried about the kind of situation they're finding themselves in. And that's quite significant. If we'd done this a few years ago, we'd noticed that, yes, you'd have some people worried, but it's kind of doubled. If you want to know about the countries where they're more positive, it's the Netherlands and Mexico. If you want to know the country, have a guess which the country is that's most anxious and stressed. Yes, it's the UK right now that's feeling the most anxious and the negative emotions. You do have some people, of course, who are saying they're happy, optimistic and confident, and you can be both. It doesn't have to be one or the other, different days, different things, but the overriding feeling that people are having at the moment is these negative ones that I've kind of highlighted here. And people are really worried about the future. And around 3/4 are saying this. And it is the kind of worried emotion that's seen the biggest increase year on year. And we had COVID, which was also worrying. So people were still worrying about that. And now you're adding additional layers on. And again, it's the UK and Germany, actually, who are kind of saying that they're feeling this most. But these are unsurprising, I think, because people recognize their financial situation is going to be worse. And that impacts them and how they feel. And they also recognize that it's going to be worse next year. And that's worrying. And although the fog of COVID has lifted for many, and particularly for young adults who've been able to get out and do things again, and that's helping with mental kind of health as well, people aren't that optimistic about the future. That's worrying. And it's the cost of living. So 9 in 10 are worried about the cost. I mean, who's the 1 in 10 who's not worried? I mean, we all know who they probably are, but most people are worried about this. And this has seen a huge increase. Personal finances, the economy, the impact of the war in Ukraine, combined with things like the climate as well. But like impact of like increasing energy, grocery, fuel costs, are all going to impact people in the coming 12 months. And it's consistent across all territories, all countries we've looked at. So people are going to be tightening their belts. They're planning to eat out a little less, stay in more, which is great for TV because they'll be watching more content. But they're going to be keeping a close eye on their spending. Look, this isn't just me saying it. There's plenty of research out there you'll be able to find that kind of highlights this. So it's nothing new, obvious, clear to people, but it just goes to show that when you put it into a slide and you start talking about it like this specifically, and you can take a creative group, it helps them to think about the audience in a different way. But so TV remains a kind of sanctuary for people. So with all of the issues that are going on globally, it's increasingly hard to switch off, and you have social media and you're kind of been bombarded by all sorts of kind of negative things all the time. And half say that TV helps them feel normal in uncertain times and to forget about those worries. So there's a lot of comfort taken from turning on the TV and having that escape. But while it remains a sanctuary, there's obviously going to be some impacts, because if people have less disposable income, there's going to be fewer expenditure or less expenditure going to those TV services. And a third are saying they're going to kind of cut down on their spend. Now, the global SVODs like some Netflix and Amazon and Disney fare a little better than the kind of smaller SVODs in this space. But it is something that we need to be kind of looking at, as if the subscriber numbers don't continue to increase, then they don't have as much, obviously, because of the way that they're all funded, they're all about growth. We need to be careful. And obviously, we need to be looking at how do we help support our productions to reduce the cost of production, to help in those ways as well. So it's a good segue into another piece that we've done. And this is on the kind of growth of content, which has been growing significantly over the last few years. Look, we're living through this period as well of abundant TV. We've got this quality TV everywhere. We've got short form, long form, curated, non-curated, bingeable, blah, 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 blah. And that's the amazing thing about right now. We've got so much content, and we can show you, we can prove this. So this is the content growth of unscripted on the kind of big streamers globally over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And this could be produced, it could be acquired. And as you can see, as the number of streamers grow, so does the amount of content in terms of unscripted on them. So you've got lots of growth as well. it's not, is it sustainable? Are people everywhere? Yes, audiences are bloody everywhere at the moment. It's hard to keep track of who's watching what. No one's watching the same thing at the same time. Does that matter? But when you look at entertainment show launches overall, and this is from a company called The Wit that looks at all of the entertainment show launches across the globe, you can see there's consistency. So there's lots of new shows that are kind of being launched. And it's the same going back for many years, goes back to 2009. So you're still adding more shows into the mix, and the streamers kind of airing more as well. So there's more and more content being produced. And this is true for scripted as well. So this is scripted shows launched each year, 2009, 2013, 2017. There's a massive boom there, as we all know, but it's easy to kind of highlight and show in a nice, pretty graph. So there's more shows available, more ways to watch. And it's often interesting when people say, oh, there's nothing to watch at the moment. That's absolute rubbish. There's so much to watch. It's just sometimes people get a bit confused. I'll talk about that in a second. But obviously with that, it creates problems. And I'm sure you guys are only too aware of all of these problems. Don't need to be someone like me pointing them out. But as the industry grows and changes, there's an awful lot of new headaches that are created around availability, training, the impact of COVID, cost of living crisis, inflation, political changes about how do we get our stuff couried across. But it creates problems for the audience. And I know there's the problems that you guys are probably thinking about, but it's the audience that I'm focusing on. So I'm going to go back to a bit more eye count research and kind of show you something there. I'm sure we've all been like this when we've been scrolling for something to watch, looking through, trying to find something. And the changing audience behavior is because you have so much choice, in addition of more and more content, more and more people saying to you, you should watch this, you should watch this, watch this, watch this. So we did a study again that kind of highlighted that half of saying, look, there's too much choice at the moment, and it's hard to keep up with all of the new shows. So how do you find that difference to ensure that the audience wants to come to you as opposed to the abundance of other content that's out there? And people are saying it's taking longer to find a show. And we all probably have this situation where we've given up and watched nothing, or we've gone back to something that we've watched 10 times before because there's the comfort. It's that, where am I going to find my enjoyment at that time? So it's impacting audiences as well as the kind of industry, and the growth of content is where I'm going to talk about the wider industry now in terms of the wider changing viewing habits that we've got. So if you're thinking about the future of TV, it's driven by the industry creating new ways of doing things in terms of streaming or fast channels. And then the audience decides, oh, actually, I quite like consuming my content in that way. I'm going to go and get that for free, or I'm going to binge that. And then they want more of that. So then the industry changes to adapt to the audience again. And we can highlight this in a number of different ways, but I've gone for the US here. And this is Nielsen. It's a bloody awful screen grab, so apologies about that. So Nielsen measure the kind of total consumption of the TV set. This comes from July of this year, and you can see the breakdown of how that is in terms of what's being watched. If you look back only a year, cable was number one, whereas now you've got streaming at about 35% of all content being used on the TV set, and it's growing significantly, and that's only going to increase. So yes, although that's like just over half are still watching in that kind of traditional broadcast or cable space, it is declining. And we can look at that, and we can kind of highlight other things. We can look across multiple markets in terms of the, the average daily viewing time of linear TV. And the interesting one here is the US, which we've just been focusing on. So in 2014, there were 282 minutes daily viewed of linear TV. They've lost 100 by 2021. So whereas it was the most watched in terms of the TV consumption, it's now going to decline, and it's going to drop below probably the UK next year, or this year, sorry, and potentially the Netherlands the year after. And this is all quite worrying for certain people who obviously work in the kind of traditional space. And people often ask me, well, how are you going to fix that? What are we going to do? What are the content trends? What are we going to be able to do to kind of boost that back up? I was speaking with our CEO, Jen Mullen, a few weeks ago, and she said, look, the trends, God, trends in unscripted. Keep asking this as well. She said, my thing is, it's just really cautious. The cautiousness of everybody. And what do we mean by this? Well, linear is dominated still by long-running shows, both scripted and non-scripted. The soaps remain key to UK broadcasters in getting the audiences in that kind of early prime time. It's true in Germany, but in kind of access time, and now the markets of the world. If you look around the world, most of the biggest shows have been on air for bloody ages. American Idol in the US, one of our Fremantle formats, started in 2001, 2002. It's kind of incredible that that's still dominating, still getting 10 million viewers across the whole series. In Australia, The Block, massive show, has been on air since 2003. Farmer Wants a Wife in Germany, huge for RTL, the biggest commercial broadcaster. Back to the UK, you can look at The Apprentice, on since 2005, still huge. So that's the trend, isn't it? In terms of, well, actually, things are just on air. And if you think about that, that's like a show from the 70s still airing in the 90s. Doesn't feel like that would be, well, that's a bit wrong. Depends, I suppose, who's hosting as well. And because you've got the reliance on long-running shows, the formats market in terms of in the unscripted space is kind of changing. And there's a slide here, another one, that kind of showcases the number of traveling formats. Now, a traveling format is something like Got Talent. Airs in Britain, Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, Australia's Got Talent. There's been more than 70 versions of that across the world. But then they're declining, and they're declining because formats are staying on air because they get a decent audience, or it's hard to launch new IP, new shows. Audiences struggle to find them. And then when they do come to them, the audience is a lot smaller. So it's not delivering the same audience as those kind of more established shows. And yes, you do have the streamers who are starting to do some formats. Formats don't appear to be traveling, as you can see in the last few years, as much as they once did. And this is a trend that we're going to see continue in 2022 as well. But look, it's okay, right? It's okay because long-running shows are adapting in terms of, with the technology available, to be able to still deliver the same audience. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about a Fremantle show. So it's The Apprentice in the UK. And you can see that in the last 10 years, the audience has been remarkably consistent, around 7.5, 8 million across the whole time period. But what's changed is how people are actually consuming that. So if you just look at the overnights, and I cannot emphasize enough that overnights do not mean what they once did, but everybody still contacts me at 9:33 in the morning. It's like, how did that show do in the UK? We're really into that. It's like, it isn't as important. We need to wait. And so you can see it's gone, the overnights have gone from about 6.3 million in 2012 to 4.6 million. And then you have the 28-day catch-up, which is the kind of the yellow at the top. But it's the 7-day catch-up. It's the repeats. It's the iPlayer. You have to bolt everything together. We, and I say we as in audience insight people, we need about a month to tell you whether your show is any good. Nobody wants to wait a day. But as the audience changes in terms of how they're consuming in the kind of non-scripted space, it's also true, and more so true, in the scripted space as well. So this is from a couple of years ago. All very familiar with this excellent show. It's a Scene, Channel 4. And what we've done here is we've kind of changed it slightly. So the blue is the kind of 7-day consolidation. So you can see that episode 1 was 3.3 million, and it was 1.6 million by episode 5. But it's the consumption via pre-broadcast, so that the episode 5, 4 million had watched that episode before it even gone out on the linear channel 4. And that's significant. We just need to be aware of this. And I know most of you might be going, I know this. It's remarkable when I'm speaking to people, how few people do know how these things work and why these things matter. And that's my responsibility within Fremantle, to try to educate people in terms of, what does this all mean, and how are we going to ensure that we kind of can talk back to our customers like we know what we're talking about. Another trend around in terms of non-scripted space, in terms of why cautiousness is there, is that there's just tons of reboots happening at the moment. And this is a global phenomenon. And what you've got is these shows are easier to promote. You're hoping that the audience is going to come back that previously watched. And so you've got a range of different shows here that are coming back in multiple different countries. In the UK, Big Brother's coming back. We've also got I think Survivor coming to BBC One, Gladiators, it's like the return of the 90s again. Is that bad? Is it good? They're great formats. Does it matter? No, probably not, as long as the audience comes. But marketability, I think, is really important. And as we have a fragmented audience kind of everywhere, linear needs something to kind of build that kind of excitement and build that audience up. Because what happens is audiences are coming in and then they're disappearing. They're coming in for the show they want and then they're off again. There's no such thing as a great lead-in anymore. It doesn't necessarily work unless it's a huge show. And even then, you can watch a show get a 4 or 5 million audience, and the next show gets about 600,000. And this is highlighted kind of here in terms of the decline in primetime audience. So what we've got is the quarter one. So the first 3 months of each year between 2018 and 2022. You've got two broadcasters there, BBC One and ITV, and you can see that it was about 4.5 million in terms of their primetime audience in the first quarter of 2018. It's now down to just over 3.2 or 3.4 million for ITV and BBC. But it's the streaming. Okay, streaming has increased. There's a big bump in Q1 of 2021 when we're all in lockdown. But you can see that line is kind of consistent. Where it was kind of going to, it's just a bit of a blip, a bit of a bump, and it will continue to grow on that trajectory. I don't know why I'm pointing. Nobody can see. And so this is the reality that we're facing. Yes, that 7.1 million obviously is watching maybe, I don't know, 200,000 different shows. It's really difficult to kind of say. But it's really easy to kind of highlight again this from who's winning the slots. So if you look at the 9 to 10 p.m. slots in the UK, you can break that down by who won that slot, who got the biggest audience. And in 2017, across the whole year, 176 times BBC One was the winner. 125 times it was ITV. And it was 61 times the kind of the overall streaming kind of bundle was there. Whereas now, and look, it's going to increase even more so this year, but in 2021 and in 2020, it's significantly the streaming platform. And so you've got lots of different shows there. And obviously you're comparing to one channel with one show, so it's not a great comparison, but it's a really clear way of showing you where the audience is. However, let's talk a bit of positivity, because for the linear kind of market, the ad market is still pretty strong, and that's really important, particularly obviously for the commercial broadcasters. And it's important for us as we're trying to pitch to various different broadcasters as well. And look, it was a tough year for advertising as marketing spend declined in 2020, as everybody was very cautious about what they were going to do. It jumped up again towards the end of that year, actually. And then it significantly increased for 2021. And you've got some kind of stability over the coming years. However, you've also got inflation, which is obviously going to mean that actually means a little bit less. And so this is another one of the things that we do. We were able to look at the broadcaster revenue associated with our shows or with the channels, and we can help with those productions when they're going in to renegotiate a second season and say, well, the broadcaster telling us that actually we take it's going to decline the audience advertising revenue, is declining, and we can prove it. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they've raised their prices significantly to kind of impact that kind of lower audience. So it's about providing that insight into not just the audience, but also into the various parts of the industry that can feel a bit unknown. And we're able to do that. And that's really important, I think. So that's linear. We're going to talk a little bit about streaming now. And look, the streaming market is pretty tough, I think, to kind of come into, to actually make any real money from, as in not for us, for Fremantle, I mean for those businesses. It's all loaded with debt. So if you look at the streaming market, you've got tons of different VODs, and you know what these are. You've got the kind of the advertising VOD, you've got the subscription VOD, you've got the broadcaster VOD, which is also part of the advertising VOD as well, transaction VOD, premium VOD, film releases and like. But the really interesting one for me, I think, and it's obviously for most people, is that kind of subscription at the moment. And look, we're able to kind of look at those subscription numbers. We're able to break this down by those various different streamers. We're able to break it down in those individual markets. We're able to say, well, is that going to increase? What are they actually doing in terms of the cost the revenue they're generating per individual user, because you can have loads and loads of Disney subscribers, but if they're all in India and they're all on Star and they're all paying far less than they are for Netflix in North America, that's not great. It's not a great way of looking at these things. So it's about, one of the other things that we do is we try to educate people in this, particularly in the sales part of the business, when they're trying to sell finished content, is, okay, what's actually happening and why are they trying to charge this particular price for this type of content? And obviously, if we put some subscription streaming numbers up there, we also want to talk about Netflix. And no presentation is ever complete with some little chat about Netflix. And obviously, the kind of share price and the market cap that kind of declined early this year, but it's bounced back a little bit over the last couple of months. And it's all about a market correction. We don't need to go into all that. I don't want to go into my economics degree, but it's really key for them to focus on the big markets. It really is. It's really important, particularly as we're able to kind of highlight that they have got a bit of a quality issue. So we use a company called Ampere Analysis, and they track the number of Netflix originals that are released, which is the kind of, what would we call that? The kind of grey line, the grey line between 2015 and 2021. So the number of Netflix originals released was 30, it's now 246. They also do something called a critical rating. So that's taking things like IMDb scores, Rotten Tomatoes, and various other freely available rating sites and come up with this score. And you can see that the actual content, although it's increasing, the rating of it is kind of declining a bit as they've got so much out there. We've all talked about this. There's just so much rubbish on there potentially, is there? I don't know, because people are going to find the things they want to find. And often shows are burning bright and fading fast as people kind of come in, go, bang, go. And so how are people actually really feeling about them? They've often forgotten about them. And what you want is somebody to remember your content and to be able to talk about your content, create that kind of buzz around it. And look, Disney doesn't have this problem. Yes, we're coming from a far lower base. So we've got the same things here from 12 Disney originals in 2019 to last year, there being 38. And it could have been a bit of a dicey one in terms of 2020, it declined in terms of their critical rating, but it's bumped back up. What does Disney know how to do? And it creates characters, creates brands, it repeats them, it keeps them in the kind of same universe, whether you like it or not. They've got tastemakers who understand their audience. Look, this is just some data that's showing, the quality of the content. Look, that's the end of the research we have, along with kind of providing a little bit of insight. And now we're going to obviously have a big debate. You're going to tell me I'm wrong, or we shouldn't have presented this or said something. But all of this kind of stuff that we do, and this is just a kind of teaser of the kind of things we do, because I can't give you everything. I mean, that would be wrong, wouldn't it? Is to kind of help in production, development, and sales. Look, it's a really exciting time to be working in the industry. There's so much good stuff going on there. Look, and my department sits centrally, which is really exciting because we're able to work with all different parts as well. But all of this adds, hopefully, to a kind of feeling of understanding the market, understanding audiences, companies, to help people focus on development and production. Right then, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Wow.
So, there you go. It's a whistle-stop tour, right?
My God, that was, it was a little depressing at times, actually.
Good. That's what I wanted to do on a Friday. Have a bad weekend, right?
Yeah, it was just a little, but it was remarkable to just see, the changing habits of audiences, what they're consuming, what they're not consuming. I mean, for you guys, what did that kind of anything jump out to you guys, having seen that presentation? What were the kind of first thoughts for you, Dave?
Yeah, hiya, I'm Dave. Hello. I thought it was really fascinating. I find this really interesting. For me, I'm particularly interested in the moment in television programs where audiences start dropping off. And does the data give you any insight into that, or trends, or there's a big stall about getting the pre-titles right and when's the first ad break, and how you sustain the audience? Is there anything that you can reveal, magic tricks to keep them watching longer?
We have done some research on this. I think it was about 6 months ago. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but the key thing that we noticed is you need to engage people almost instantly, as in people will give up, and they will give up in the non-scripted space far quicker than they will in the scripted space. You've got a few minutes to capture people. And so if you're thinking, if you're thinking about it as bringing a show, you need to be hooking people within those first 10, 15, 20 seconds. It cannot be boring. It cannot be a kind of explanation about what it needs to engage straight away. Otherwise people go, right, I'm off, I'm gone. I'm gonna go for something else. In the scripted space, it's like people will give that 10, 20 minutes to kind of understand. And some people like to give it a full episode to fully understand. But people are more likely to just switch. It's the attention, isn't it, that people have there. People just think, well, there must be something better. And there probably is something better. So then you've got to try and find that thing, haven't you? So I would say, I mean, in terms of actually the pre-titles and various things, we're not a broadcaster, but yeah, in terms of that's what I would talk to the producers about, in terms of keeping that initial. And we can see it across all of our shows internationally as well, when you have these great big long intro sequences, which is, you know, it's like, well, I know this show, or I don't need to know this. It's like keeping the content really focused.
Have you ever tested pre-titles?
No.
No.
I was going to say, John's made a really valid point. John, are you there? I think a really valid point. So he was saying that, you know, it may look depressing, but the fact that people are turning to TV in this time, you know, where it is so kind of dark and there's so much conversations around, you know, crisis of living and so on and so forth, that there is a lot of hope. There's a real opportunity there that people are turning. Yeah, hi John. Do you want to? Yeah,
yeah.
I thought that was a really valid point, really important point. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought obviously lots is depressing there with, you know, viewers turning away to streamers, but well, some of us provide content for streamers, so there's opportunity there too. But what you said about these, you know, these uncertain, worrying times for people, TV providing comfort, that's just great to hear, and it feels like I kind of feel a sense of responsibility in a way in terms of what we provide. We should, doesn't mean you have to provide comfort TV and not make, you know, challenging docs on, you know, complex social issues, but it's something to keep in mind. I think it does make you think that opportunities are still there for us. So yeah, I do take some comfort from
that. I think you're right in terms of, if people are going out less and have less disposable income, they are still going to be needing to be entertained, as well as being educated. And so it isn't just, let's, you know, make people feel better. People do want that complete escapism, whether that's from a really dark drama or it's from a really interesting, gritty documentary. It just means you need to be still thinking about, well, it's just the same thing, isn't it? Just try to entertain that audience. But obviously there needs to be that focus on audiences are feeling different.
Yeah. Worth keeping in mind. I think there's probably less room, and certainly the ratings show it, for gritty, you know, depressing docs on social policy and things, but you still want to make them, you don't want to shy away from them. Maybe there's a different way into those issues that we need to think about if people are feeling so worried, as we say, in these uncertain times.
And Mal, sorry to pick on you, but as a commissioner, I know I can just see you, and I know that Naz is off screen. How does that kind of information translate to because you choose programs? Are those? I'm sure that you're pretty aware of a lot of the things that was discussed there. But what kind of jumped out for you, and what's kind of helpful in terms of the role that you do?
Sorry, I'm just like listening in, and sorry, sending a message saying hi to everybody. I'm Naz, I work at the BBC. I mean, yeah, most of that stuff we knew already, sadly, and it is tough out there. I mean, very interested in the kind of reboots thing, and I suppose one of the things that I'm interested in is, you know, in terms of reality TV, kind of what's the future of reality TV? Because there have been a lot of iterations of shows at the moment, and it's like, you know, how do you stand out in the marketplace? Because at BBC Three, that's where I work, primarily you do want to try and stand out in the marketplace. And we do feel like we've got a very specific remit for British under 35s. And if you look at where Netflix is going, you know, they're not making or spending as much money in the UK. So that's a very specific gap for us, isn't it? And I still think the young audience will want things that looks I mean, yeah, everyone wants to escape and want to be in Dubai, want to see lovely properties, but there'll come a point where people do also want to talk about, mental health issues in the UK. Our audience is very interested in that, or they want to talk about, money and the cost of living. So we have a very specific role, but equally we want to do some of the kind of the nice stuff as well. But for me personally, I'm very interested in reality TV and where that goes, because I don't know what, I know Fremantle's made some of the best of it, kind of what's next, because you can reboot as much as you like, but I think the audience might sniff that out anyway in a couple of years' time. I wonder if, because actually I wonder if those rebooting will ultimately, I suppose, appeal to people of my generation, 80s and 90s kids, right? And so you're still not getting the younger audiences in. But yeah, I mean, most of that stuff, hate to say it, but we kind of already knew. So,
Sorry for boring you.
But no, it's really useful, and it's useful to hear from the supplier base, and it's great. You guys are on it. I mean, we talk to all your execs all the time. So yeah, we know how challenging it is. But thank you.
Can I pick up on something that you said, actually, which is really important? We've done some, it's people do want to see themselves reflected in TV, as in, it isn't all just, as you say, somewhere in Dubai, something absolutely perfect. It is about tackling those things that people are going through, and how you can kind of get some help, advice, thoughts, whatever it might be. It's really important that people do see their own lives sometimes reflected authentically. And I think that's something that the BBC does very well. I watched a very good documentary last week on young, I think it was BBC Three. It was on BBC One, but it was late night, so I assume it was part of that strand. And it was talking about the mental health crisis within young children. It's just flipped onto it, fascinating, and kind of stuck with it. And it's those things that I find interesting, because it just captivated me straight away. Having a teenage daughter, kind of trying to understand what she's going through. And that's what TV can do. That's the power, I think.
I mean, no, you're absolutely right. And I mean, do you guys, God, I know that you guys pitch shows all the time, but what are your thoughts around sort of reality TV? Reality TV. Have you guys got any thoughts? Because I know you made Snowflake Mountain. I thought it was quite good. Actually, I really enjoyed that. But is it, because it is really hard to come in with a new title in that space? As a business, how are you guys sort of tackling that?
So it's really interesting, because we did quite a lot of research on the title as well, because there's obviously lots of discussion about what it should be, but the title is really important in kind of defining that show, I think, and it gives it a particular kind of edge already. And if you look at the other names that were available for that, I think although I won't tell you what the kind of research was showcasing, but it's kind of that to me was really important. I kind of forgot what the exact question was. The future of reality TV. The future of reality TV. So there's going to be iterations that people are going to have. So you're going to be slightly tweaking with things, which is what's actually happening at the moment. But this is the problem. It's like, it's really hard to know what that actual future is. And I was at a development conference this week for all of our unscripted kind of heads of development across all territories and labels. And they're all coming up with various different ideas, and there are 8 or 9 of these things pitched in the kind of the dating space and in the more reality space. And you could look at it and is it technology that's kind of added into that? And you focus on the kind of more AR or kind of VR space, but it feels like a little bit too early for most people. And so this is what people are grappling with. It's those small amends to things which people go, oh, well, I kind of seen this, but this is quite a nice new twist on that particular play. And then that's particularly true in the dating kind of space, I would say, more than any, which feels very kind of saturated in terms of ways that you can date, who you date, how you date. I think I saw a show that's coming from Japan or Korea, which is it's your dog choosing your partner. So there's 3, and you go out and you go for a walk, and it's like this, there's all sorts of things that people are trying to do, but the future of it, I can never claim to know exactly what that would be.
There's an interesting conversation happening. I think there's 2 things. I think, Marie, you made a really good point about diversity and inclusion, and particularly as we're all of color here, I think that it does kind of create a wonderful opportunity in terms of the need for authentic voices. Marie, do you want to talk to that? You made a point about the importance, kind of it really leans in and really kind of emphasizes and affirms the importance of more diversity and inclusion. Are you with us?
Hello, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, everything that you were saying was really, really interesting, and I'm going to watch this back again just so I can completely kind of capture everything. But it for me, like that idea of the long-standing kind of formats delivering consistently, and that's like a staple, and obviously all broadcasters should continue to do that. But then the idea that growth, that's what all broadcasters are wanting and streamers are like, but really diving into the fact that diversity, equity, inclusion, and those different perspectives are perhaps what could lead that growth, especially when you was talking about the things that people are most concerned about. And like unanimously, I think across the board, people are worried about their finances and cost of living and all these sorts of things. But if you're not able to find like a safe haven or some sort of element of connection with television, like streaming, whichever way you kind of view things, but just that idea of representation, and I think that there's a real opportunity for growth, and that becomes then the business imperative for diversity, equity, inclusion, which often is like a case that people have to fight for. But actually, I think just when you dive deep into the data and the reality, that it shows that that's where the lean-in should be. So it was really, really, really
100% agree. And I think one of the things that I think the word I probably use most from is about authenticity. And that comes up time and time again in terms of both our scripted and non-scripted research, and how you ensure that on screen that's being represented effectively. So you're totally right, and there definitely is an opportunity for more in that area.
And I think there's an opportunity as program makers who will come from backgrounds, who know about communities, the various different communities that are from, to bring a real level of authenticity to the programs that you're working on, and really think about how you can really leverage that as a skill, as an insight, as a perspective. And I'm sure that you guys are doing that, but in this time where people are really asking for authenticity, how do you really leverage that? Also, I want to go to Adnan, because you had made a really good point about Netflix. Do you want to talk to that in the chat? Are you with us? Because I know you said
after that, can we go to Emma, because Emma's got her hand up.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, Emma, I didn't see you. Adnan, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, so am I going?
Yes, please.
Oh, great. So for a start, yeah, thanks so much for your time today. I'm finding it really fascinating. I'm a filmmaker, a director, and over the years, I've sort of taken it for granted that I don't get close to data. And it's always been something that I've always waited for my exec friends to sort of like send me in terms of overnights and things like that. But I'm really interested in it now and wanting to get closer to it. So I really value your time here and the info. My point was that it's just it's been a real while since I've heard anyone say out loud what I think everyone is thinking, which is that Netflix has a quality issue. I remember I used to talk to friends about Discovery, because it used to be a real mark of achievement to work for Discovery. And then behind the scenes, we'd sort of be saying, oh God, there's a lot of crap on there though, isn't there? So I see it as quite refreshing, and I see it as an opportunity. And I'm just wondering actually whether this means that certain sort of streamers or other broadcasters, have they reached a point of sort of like quantity over quality? And also in terms of quality, is there a metric for quality, beyond sort of like Rotten Tomatoes, which I love, and what's the antidote to this? Without putting off people who might be pitching to Netflix. Obviously, Netflix wants to have a load of programming and a load of content. So what will be the antidote to the quality issue if they've got one, in terms of raising the quality without reducing the amount of content they're going to be offering, because it's not going to happen overnight.
No, there was a number of questions in there.
Sorry, yes, there were.
No, I'm going to try. I've scribbled some notes. I'm going to try to answer them. If I don't, then you're going to have to say it. So for a start, it's not me saying it. It's the data. So I don't just want to put that out there in case this goes anywhere. And I'm just saying that I'm saying this thing about Netflix. It's come from Ampere Analysis, and we're able to do this. But you're right. It's important to kind of highlight that. Yes, I think there is a quantity over quality issue across the board in terms of, and I think I highlighted that in terms of not just from the audience perspective, but from the way that you're able to make those shows as well. Do you have the right people to be able to make them in terms of, so we need that kind of influx of people into the industry at all different levels. How do you mark quality? You mark quality in a traditional way by how many people watched. So if 10 million people watched, you go, well, that's quality television because it did that thing for that audience. It was hitting that. You obviously can look at reviews, you can look at kind of social chatter and those things as well. So this is the problem that we face in the streaming space, because although those numbers that we can get for Netflix and for Amazon are all done by an agency, and there's lots of different agencies out there, different ways of measuring, but they're not actually the metrics that matter most to the streamer. I don't know if there's anyone from a streamer here who probably wants to talk better than that. In terms of, it isn't just about the volume of those people. Is it the first show that you came in and watched? Did you watch then something straight away? How much are you watching? The time spent? It's all of these things which we don't really know. So we're able to kind of get some form of understanding, but that understanding the quality issue, which is why everybody goes back to these different ways of kind of measuring, which is the kind of IMDb scores and aggregating things up, is another way of looking at it. And this just makes my job much more difficult now than it did 5 years ago and it did 10 years ago, because it was really straightforward then. It was a really clear way that you could measure success and measure kind of quality. And there's also the surveying methods and things you can do as well. Was that all of the questions? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, that was.
Okay, brilliant, thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
Emma, did you say you wanted to, Emma, you was going to say something, yeah?
Yeah,
And then Emil.
Hi, Paul. I work for Fremantle for Naked, and I head up the Escape to the Country brand. And so, I've been looking at. You've sent me quite a bit of data over the years, actually, in terms of going back. Yeah,
was I nice to you on email?
Yes, very nice, very nice. I just want to know how you would track the success of a brand from country to country. How do I to balance the creative needs of the commissioner and the channel with the business needs of the production company? For example, what kind of useful data can I tap into when the channel are interested in the audience figures for this country, but the company, Escape is hugely successful. It's Naked. The past 5 years, it's the top show for Naked. So, it's important that I'm making things for the global audience as well as the audience in this country. And as we're evolving the brand, I don't know yet whether it's going to be as successful a brand with the new format change, which are very British, when we're trying to sell internationally.
So the question there is, how do you ensure that you produce locally for the market, but also have an understanding of the international as well?
When are you tracking the data for a show like Escape, when you're it's sold to countless countries throughout the world? It's probably more successful for FMI than it is for us selling to the BBC.
What we could do, and we could take it offline, is we could have a discussion about how we would do that, because there is something we could do. Because what we can do is we can get audience figures for pretty much any of our shows anywhere in the world. So we'll be able to track that, and we can benchmark. So what we would do is we would look at what the previous season before the changes, and then the new season after, how that would go in terms of predicting what those numbers will be without them actually having aired that. I don't know. It's very difficult to know. Although there is something I'm just thinking about, and I'll write it down, and maybe we could do something. So we could think about the key revenue generating territories that that FMI are selling that in, and we could understand what that audience wants. So that there are ways we could help. But let's do that next week, shall we?
Before I go to Emil, I think it's really interesting, that point that there is a demand as we get more global for super local stories, right? That have global demand. So how do you? It kind of seems to be kind of going at odds with each other, and it's kind of it's slightly to what Emma was talking about. How do you kind of have those stories that really impact on the UK and your local audiences, but also have global appeal? Has kind of any data kind of shown up or thrown any light into that space, or into that conversation?
I mean, I think I don't think we have data, but I think I would have an opinion which isn't the same as data, which would be along the lines of, if you're producing for your local market in an authentic way that highlights what it is you need to be kind of high, whether it's Escape or other shows, that's what people are buying into anyway. And so you have to focus on your key broadcaster, your key commissioner, and hopefully that will resonate and be able to sell around. With the point around Escape, then we would have to think about, okay, well, what are those changes that has that negatively impacted? And there's ways we could look at that. And maybe we should have spoken before. We could have done some research into kind of what you were looking to do and whether that would have had an impact. But do I think anything different to that? No, I think that's probably my answer.
And I think that's a really good answer. And I think that's the general answer, the authenticity. I think we keep coming back to that point about authenticity. Emil, we've kind of probably got about 2 or 3 minutes. This is probably the last question we're able to take in. We're finishing at 12:30, right? It's an hour session, isn't it, Jay? Jay's gone. Well, Jay's telling me that I should know.
It's an hour session.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. We finished it. So we got probably about 5 minutes left. Emil, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks very much for your time, Paul, and for the presentation you put together. I know they take a long time to do. So my overwhelming feeling from that is that, are we getting to a point where program brands are, in an agnostic kind of world, are we getting to a point where program brands are more important than channel brands and streamer brands? Will we ever get to a point, do you think, where actually it's like the movies? You pay for the program specifically. Obviously, Taskmaster have put this specific model into play. Now, it feels like you could really do that for the big brands like Game of Thrones, Love Island, all of those kind of things. So you have a subscription model for brands rather than channels. Because it doesn't, I don't even know if people really know where these shows are half the time, or if they register that. And the other thing is, with so much quantity, you dip into the show and then you don't stay and watch the next program. You don't just move on to the next thing that's on the list. You then go and seek out the next show, regardless of what platform that's on.
This is true. I think as a producer, I'm always going to say that the program brands are more important than the broadcaster brands, and people are watching the brand as opposed to coming to but equally that's something that I've now realized I've been recorded, so that's not something I should be saying. I think it's really interesting to say that. I think in about 2016, 17, there was discussions amongst our parent company RTL about what to do. Should we be, focusing on some kind of Fremantle streamer? We've got all this content. What should we be doing? It's like, well, no, because we've got such random content in all sorts of the genre spaces. But I do think that your point about people aren't necessarily brand loyal to the streamers. They are, I think. If you just look at what happened with the funeral a couple of weeks back, where it was the BBC that people came to, and that's what you're expecting. However, my daughter doesn't know really the difference. Is 16, doesn't really know BBC 1, 2, what their defining kind of characteristic shows are. She knows it as Netflix, Disney, and Sky. And so it's all on the guide. It's the guide, isn't it? So we've got all the stuff. It's just in a different way of searching the content. She's not brand loyal like that. She knows Gogglebox is on Sky.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And then with that amount of quantity, which varies in quality, shall we say, it just makes me think that we're going to either have to do one of two things. It's either money or profile or talent that's going to get shows seen, that's going to be able to punch through that incredibly crowded and disparate market, or we're going to have to stick with formats for 3, 4, 5 series, even if they don't register, like maths.
I think you're spot on there. I think you can put a huge amount of money into the budget to do that. The profile of the show or the talent that's there. I think you often find in the drama space now that everything's kind of quite talent led, to be able to get and from the early stages in terms of the funding and the commission. If you have a piece of talent attached, it helps. It often helps and you hear the discussions internally in a non-scripted side where they say, well, we're looking to pitch this show. It happens a lot in the US. We're looking to pitch this show, but we haven't got the talent attached yet, so we're not taking out to pitch. You're like, oh, okay, so that's really important. And that's what people buy into, and that's what brings people. And then if you think about how you market that show, if they have a great big social following, that's really useful as well to kind of build off the back of. So yeah, I would 100% agree with you.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. I just found that really interesting, and I think that most of us spend so much time trying to be creative that we kind of often forget that we're serving an audience, right? And understanding their audience and what their needs are is really important. And there's a really lovely balance that can be struck with kind of data and creativity. And I know that we were talking about that a little bit online on WhatsApp. Now, if anybody felt that their, Paul, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but if anybody felt that their questions, they had a burning question that they didn't get asked, if you send it to us, we will get over to Paul, and I'm hoping Paul would be even more generous with his time and maybe able to answer any questions. I think we covered most of the things here. It was a fantastic session and really insightful. And we
just to say that if anybody does have any additional questions about anything or want some advice on how they can access to various different things, I'm more than happy to obviously reply by email, but I'm always happy to have a call to discuss anything as well to kind of help. So please feel free to just put my email address, and if anybody wants to contact anytime, I can help in any way, then just let me know.
Did you hear what he just offered? I want you to hear what that gentleman just offered. He just said that you should email me and call me. Paul B, you shouldn't have done, because they'll be ringing you, and I hope that they do. Wow. So really take him up on that. I mean, that is amazing. That's insane. And particularly if you're in development or there's spaces where he could really, really kind of guide you and make you think about what you're doing. So Paul, that's amazing. That was a little bit more than I was asking. So thank you so much. It was a fantastic session. Please, on WhatsApp, and more important, on Mighty Networks, go and explain, tell everybody what you thought about the session, tell everybody what you got out of the session, and let's continue the conversations. Jay, is there anything that I forgot or that I should be saying to people?
No, I would just say to people, please join my networks, and because that's where I'll be posting Paul's email address if you want to ask him any questions.
Cool. And also just to remind you, there's a survey on Mighty Networks about a lot of people. We were reading the feedback on the survey progress reports. Thank you so much. But a lot of you were talking about timings, and sometimes the timing's been quite challenging. So there is a poll. If you don't comment, we will choose timings, and we might keep timings the same. So if it is a real issue, please make sure you jump on there and tell us. Yeah. So
decisions by data. That's what you're doing.
Yes. We're running a poll.
We're modern like that. We like, see, we know. I didn't even know that. You said that, and I was like, oh my God, we are doing that. But that's been fantastic. Such a great session, Paul. You are amazing. And just so, yeah, down to earth. I was a little worried. I was excited but worried because data. I was like, I had a cup of coffee here just in case I dropped off, but it was exciting. It was really interesting. It wasn't anything what I thought. So thank you so much. You're amazing. Thanks, and we look forward to catching up, and we'll be in contact. Thank you, guys. See you guys soon.
Thank you very much, guys.
I'm going to stay on for a couple of minutes.